A world of uncertainty. The struggle to sleep in medieval times. Imagine waking up in a world where survival isn't guaranteed. Your bed is made of straw, and the roof above you barely keeps out the rain. The streets are filled with the sounds of animals, the cries of vendors, and the clattering of carts. A constant hum of anxiety lingers in the air, of plagues, wars, and invasions. It's early morning in the 12th century, and as you open your eyes you might feel a sharp chill in the air. The room you sleep in is small, maybe shared with a dozen others. You can't remember when you last saw a full night's sleep. But then again, in this era, what is sleep? The typical medieval night is anything but peaceful. No electric light, no comfort of central heating, and no soft mattresses. The poor live in crowded, drafty rooms where the floors are bare, and the bed is often a shared space. A simple straw mattress on a wooden frame, or sometimes just a pile of furs. Imagine trying to sleep on a surface that's far from soft, surrounded by the pungent smells of animal waste and unwashed bodies. The air is heavy with the scent of damp earth, burning firewood, and perhaps a hint of food cooking in a nearby hearth. In this time, the dark is not your friend. The sun goes down early in the winter months, and with it, the world plunges into darkness. In the absence of candles or lanterns, which are luxuries few can afford, the only light might come from the dim, flickering embers of a fire in the hearth. The night stretches endlessly, and it's in this darkness where the worries of the day pile up. Disease, war, famine, and the ever-present threat of death. But sleep, even in this grim world, is necessary for survival. After a day of physical labor, sleep becomes the body's refuge. However, there is no guarantee of restfulness. The sounds of the night are enough to disturb even the most exhausted of workers. The faint noises of the streets, dogs barking, carts rumbling, and neighbors arguing, penetrate your thin wall. If you're lucky, the walls of your dwelling are thick enough to drown out some of the noise, but the constant fear of what might come in the dark is ever present. Sleep in the Middle Ages isn't just a time of rest, but an ordeal, where each breath might be your last. Though you may not know it, the way you sleep in this era will shape the very course of human history. The conditions of your humble existence, these daily struggles, will push societies to find new ways of coping with fear, hunger, and disease. Who would have thought that these seemingly insignificant challenges would lead to innovations that shape the world we live in today? As you close your eyes, ready to drift into the restless sleep of a medieval soul, the night looms large with uncertainty. Will you wake up to face another day of survival, or will something, perhaps the sudden arrival of an invader or the illness that is sweeping through the town, take that chance away? How much longer can you keep up with the relentless demands of this harsh life? Will your resolve hold strong as the days grow longer? In this section, we've established the atmosphere of fear and uncertainty that defined the medieval period, focusing on how these elements made sleep an arduous and sometimes impossible task. The unseen threats of night, plague, invasions, and the dark side of sleep. As the night deepens, the struggle for sleep intensifies. You toss and turn on your humble bed of straw, the chill of the room sinking into your bones. The sound of the wind howling outside does little to calm your mind. But it's not just the cold that keeps you awake. It's the ever-present worry of what tomorrow might bring. At any moment, disaster could strike. One of the most terrifying threats in medieval times was the plague. In the 14th century, the Black Death spread through Europe like wildfire, killing millions in its wake. It's difficult to imagine the constant fear that hung over the people of the time. The fear of waking up to a loved one gone, a neighbor dead in their bed. The plague wasn't just a sudden illness. It was a slow creeping death that you could feel moving through the air, carried by rats and fleas, or by the breath of the sick. During the night you lie awake, wondering if you'll wake up tomorrow, or if the next day will bring the grim news that another family member has succumbed to the pestilence. There were no real treatments for the plague, and even the most advanced minds of the time were baffled by the suddenness and deadly nature of it. Sleep, in this context, becomes an eerie experience, a time when people were unable to escape their fears, when even in their rest they were haunted by the spectre of death. But the threat of plague isn't the only danger that lingers in the night. Throughout the medieval period, invasions and raids were a constant reality. Vikings, Mongols, and countless other marauding groups made their way across Europe and the Middle East. Towns and villages were burned to the ground, and the people living there faced the terrifying possibility of being raided at any moment. Sleep, for many, was a fleeting dream, for the cries of alarm could come at any moment. If you lived on the fringes of a kingdom or empire, the possibility of waking to the sound of approaching soldiers or the crackle of torches would leave you dreading the coming hours of the night. In fact, many medieval people would sleep with one eye open, always prepared for a sudden attack. Watchmen were posted at various points to sound the alarm in case of danger, but for the average person, sleep meant surrendering to a sense of vulnerability. The poor, who lived in the most exposed areas, might sleep in fear, knowing that their simple dwellings would offer no protection against a raid. Even in more peaceful times, the safety of the night was never guaranteed. It was a time when rumors spread easily, and whispers of war or plague often reached people long before any official word. It's easy to see how sleep, which should have been a time of rest, became a battleground for the mind. The sounds of distant battles, the footfalls of soldiers in the streets, or the faint sound of someone coughing might be enough to keep you up all night, waiting for news, good or bad. And let's not forget the role of superstition in medieval life. Many believed that the night was a time when spirits roamed freely. You might hear stories of ghostly figures appearing in the shadows, or perhaps you feel the hair on the back of your neck rise as an inexplicable sense of dread washes over you. Sleep in these conditions is not just about physical rest, it's about maintaining a grip on your sanity. Fear of the supernatural and of unseen forces added another layer of complexity to the already daunting task of sleep. It's no surprise, then, that many medieval people would seek comfort in strange rituals before going to sleep. Some might recite prayers, others would use charms or amulets to ward off evil, while others simply stayed awake too afraid to close their eyes. For the lucky few, sleep might come easily, but for most, it was a challenge that required a great deal of emotional and physical resilience. What did sleep mean in a world constantly at war, ravaged by plague and filled with unseen supernatural threats? Was it ever truly restful, or just a fleeting escape from the harshness of the world? As you lie awake in your small, dimly lit room, you can't help but wonder, what will the night bring? Will it be another restless night, or will you finally find the peace you so desperately seek? In this section, we've explored the emotional toll of medieval life on sleep, focusing on the constant threats of plague, invasion, and superstition. Sleep in this period was fraught with uncertainty. The patterns of sleep, how medieval people found rest in a restless world. As dawn finally approaches, the first light of day begins to filter through the cracks in your walls. The faintest glimmer of sunlight casts long shadows across the floor. You've survived another night, but it's not a victory to celebrate. Instead, it's simply another reminder that survival in this world is a constant, relentless cycle, one that doesn't stop when the sun rises. But for now, as you rise from your bed of straw and stiff blankets, the need for rest still lingers in your bones. What's strange, though, is that sleep in medieval times was not always a continuous affair. In fact, it was often broken up into two distinct segments, a practice known as biphasic sleep. This divided sleep pattern wasn't something people consciously adopted, but rather a reflection of the rhythms of the time. You see, when the sun set, darkness enveloped the land quickly. Without the convenience of modern lighting, there was very little that could be done in the dark hours. People didn't have the luxury of a glowing television screen to distract them, and work ceased when the light went out. The typical medieval household would wind down for the night as soon as darkness fell, often around 7 or 8 p.m. You might spend the first few hours in a light, restless sleep, only to wake up in the middle of the night. This midnight awakening was not unusual. In fact, it was quite common. The first sleep was a period of light slumber, where you might toss and turn, hearing the creaks of the building settling around you, or the distant sounds of animals moving outside. But after a few hours, you would naturally wake, often at around midnight or 1 a.m. The practice of waking up at night was seen as normal. Some people would use this time to pray, meditate, or engage in other quiet activities. Others might visit with family members, share stories, or even go for a brief walk to relieve the anxiety of the day. During this time of wakefulness, people might reflect on their lives, contemplate the events of the day, or simply listen to the sounds of the world around them. It was a time when, in many ways, the world seemed to slow down. The overwhelming sense of fear, disease, and war would take a back seat to the quiet contemplation of the dark. This was also when many medieval people might perform their religious devotions, reciting prayers, asking for protection, and seeking solace from the divine. Monks, who were accustomed to a more regimented schedule, would often pray during the night hours as well, finding peace in solitude while the rest of the world slept. Eventually, after this period of wakefulness, people would return to their beds for the second sleep. This second sleep was generally deeper, and you could feel the full weight of exhaustion setting in. The second sleep would last until the sun began to rise, and the world slowly came back to life. This practice of biphasic sleep, where sleep was divided into two phases, was typical for much of medieval Europe. It was only with the advent of artificial lighting during the Industrial Revolution that people began to adopt the modern pattern of a single, continuous sleep period. The experience of a divided night's sleep speaks to the adaptability of humans and their ability to find rest, even when the world around them is chaotic and unpredictable. For many medieval people, this split sleep pattern was just part of life. It allowed them to adjust to the rhythms of the world without the convenience of modern comforts. The division between the first and second sleep allowed for reflection, quiet moments of solitude, and a deeper connection to the nighttime world. As the sun rises fully, casting a warm light across the floor, you begin to prepare for the day ahead. It will likely bring more struggles, more fear of plague, perhaps more uncertainty in your future. But for now, in the quiet hours of morning, you found a brief respite. Your body, though sore and tired, has managed to survive another night. What does this interrupted sleep reveal about how humans cope with fear and uncertainty? Was the night truly a time for rest, or was it a quiet battleground of the mind, a time when survival meant more than simply sleeping through the hours? As you prepare for the day's duties, you can't help but wonder, will the challenges of tomorrow feel any different from those you face today? And if you had to wake in the middle of the night once more, what thoughts would run through your mind in those still dark hours? In this final section of Story 1, we've explored the unique sleep patterns of medieval people, focusing on the biphasic sleep cycle and how it reflected their ability to cope with the uncertainties and fears of their time. The narrative ties together the themes of resilience and survival, showing how people managed to find peace despite living in a turbulent world. Medieval insomnia, how people slept in the shadows of plague and war, the night of restlessness, the struggle to find sleep amidst crisis. Imagine waking in a world where peace is but a fleeting dream, and each night is filled with the whispers of death. You are not in a palace or a fortress, but in a small, crowded home, with nothing more than a simple bed of straw and a thin blanket. The walls of your dwelling are flimsy, and the roof leaks when it rains. It's late at night, and as you lie in bed you're not alone with your thoughts. You are surrounded by the sounds of the restless city. The year is 1348, and Europe is gripped by the Black Death. The plague, as it's known, has spread across the continent, with a speed and ferocity that has left entire cities in ruins. People fall ill within days, and before the sun can rise the next morning they are dead. There's no way to prepare for it, no way to fight it. The plague has no mercy, and neither does the night. As you lie in bed you can hear the distant cries of a neighbor, a family member who has fallen ill, or perhaps the sound of a cart being rolled down the cobbled street carrying the dead to their graves. Even the most seasoned minds cannot explain the sickness, and people fear not just the disease, but the uncertain future it promises. The world around you is filled with despair and confusion, and sleep, the one thing you hope will offer a breathe, is elusive. In the darkness of the night, thoughts swirl in your mind like a storm. Is the sickness coming for you? Has it already claimed the life of someone you know? Is the next knock on the door the one that will bring bad news? The feverish thoughts don't stop when you try to close your eyes. Your body may be exhausted from days of work and worry, but your mind is trapped in a cycle of dread, and sleep refuses to come. At first it was just the plague, but now it's the constant news of invasions and wars that plague your thoughts as well. The 100 Years' War between England and France has raged for years, and rumours of marauding bands of soldiers moving through the countryside make the nights feel even more oppressive. In the midst of this chaos, The very concept of sleep begins to feel like an unreachable luxury. You roll over in your bed, trying to get comfortable. Your neighbors are similarly restless, their sleep interrupted by the same fears. The sounds of the streets drift into your room, along with the bitter smell of illness and decay. Even in this darkest of nights, you can't escape the horrors that have turned the world upside down. The medical advice at the time offers little comfort. There is no knowledge of germs, no understanding of how diseases spread. The people turn to prayer, to superstition, to anything that might give them a semblance of control over their fate. And yet, despite their best efforts, the plague continues to claim more victims. As the days blur into one another, time becomes irrelevant, and the nights stretch on longer, filled with the silent anxiety of the unknown. But it is not only the plague that keeps people awake. There is the constant fear of war and the threat of invasion. Armies move like shadows across the land, pillaging and burning as they go. As the sound of marching soldiers and the clinking of armor fills the air, you are left wondering when it will all end. How long can you endure the uncertainty, the fear and the lack of rest? Is it even possible to truly rest in a world like this? The longer you lie awake, the more the weight of everything around you becomes clear. Sleep has become a rare and fleeting moment, stolen only in the briefest of moments between the chaos and fear. Yet, even in the worst of circumstances, sleep remains essential. The body needs rest to survive, and for those who can find it, it is a small victory in a world where everything else seems uncertain. The more you try to sleep, the more restless you become. The sounds of the streets, the cries of the dying, and the distant echoes of war pull you deeper into a restless cycle. What is the price of sleep in such times, and what does it say about the human spirit, that even in the darkest hours of history, people still fought to find rest? In this section, we've explored the emotional and physical toll that the plague and war took on the sleep patterns of medieval people, focusing on how fear, uncertainty, and the dire circumstances of the time disrupted their ability to rest. Would you like to continue to section 2 of this story? Dreams of survival. The unseen toll of war and plague on the mind. The night drags on, but your mind won't relent. It spins in a haze of anxiety, filled with images of plague victims, dying neighbors, and the distant march of invading armies. The darkness outside is thick and oppressive, but it is not the only thing keeping you awake. It's the unknown, the unpredictability of life and death in these troubling times. It wasn't always like this. You remember a time when the nights were peaceful, filled with sleep and rest. But now, those quiet, restful nights seem like a distant memory. In the midst of the plague and the endless wars, sleep has become something to be feared, an interruption to your restless mind rather than a source of solace. You might close your eyes, willing yourself to sleep, but the images of the world outside invade your thoughts. You hear the faint sound of footsteps in the street, the hurried whispers of neighbors, or perhaps the cry of a child from a nearby house. Too sick to sleep, too ill to escape the horrors of the world. Even the sound of your own breathing is louder in the silence of the night, as though every part of you is on edge, alert for the danger that lurks just outside your door. Sleep, in this environment, becomes a battlefield. Not only do you battle exhaustion, but your mind wrestles with the trauma of the times. It's easy to see how this perpetual state of fear and unrest could lead to insomnia. What many don't realize is that the lack of sleep in these conditions isn't just about the physical inability to rest, it's about the mental toll that comes with it. Sleep becomes a luxury that you cannot afford, and your mind, once deprived of this vital rest, begins to unravel. What was once a essential state of unconsciousness now becomes a place where anxiety and dread run rampant. As you finally drift in and out of slumber, your dreams are no longer pleasant or restful. They are filled with nightmares, visions of plague-ridden bodies, the endless marching of soldiers, the screams of children, and the wails of the dying. Your mind is flooded with these images, and sleep, when it comes, offers no reprieve. But dreams in medieval times were not just shaped by the stress of daily life. They also carried deep cultural significance. Superstition and religion were intertwined with the very fabric of medieval existence. People believed that dreams were messages from God, foretelling the future or offering guidance. In your dreams, you might see angels or demons, perhaps even glimpses of the future. These visions would haunt you, keeping you awake long after you've returned to the waking world. The fear of the supernatural loomed large in medieval life, and the idea of restless, tormenting dreams only added to the collective anxiety. People believed that night was when evil spirits walked freely, and your inability to sleep was sometimes seen as a sign of a curse or demonic influence. This belief added another layer of fear to an already restless night. It wasn't just the plague, or the wars, or the threat of invasion. It was also the fear that sleep itself could bring something worse. And it wasn't just the fear of the supernatural that disturbed the sleep of medieval people. The harsh realities of daily life, too, played a role in their disturbed rest. For the poor and the working class, sleep was often interrupted by the physical toll of their labor. You worked from sunrise to sunset, and when you finally did lie down, your body was exhausted, but not in the peaceful way you'd expect. Every muscle ached, your body covered in cuts and bruises from the work you did. The discomfort of your bed, whether it was made of straw, fur, or a hard wooden frame, only amplified the discomfort of your body. In the midst of this exhaustion, sleep becomes a struggle between your body's desperate need for rest and your mind's unrelenting worry. The inability to sleep, or the poor quality of sleep, can lead to severe health consequences. The lack of rest wears down the body, making it more susceptible to illness. In a world already ravaged by plague and war, the impact of sleep deprivation becomes yet another obstacle to survival. Sleep, which should have been a time of escape, became a reminder of the harshness of life in the medieval world. The body needed rest, but the mind was never truly at peace. Dreams were filled with warnings, visions of the dead, and the constant fear of the unknown. In these conditions, it is no wonder that many medieval people were plagued by insomnia. As the hours stretch on, you wonder if sleep is supposed to restore and rejuvenate the body. How is it that in these times of turmoil, it has become the very thing that adds to your suffering? What does it mean when sleep, rather than bringing relief, only exacerbates your fears and anxieties? And as the night lingers, you can't help but ask, how much longer can you survive? Not just the waking world, but the endless, restless nights that accompany it. This section has explored the mental and emotional toll of the plague and war on sleep, focusing on how fear, superstition, and physical exhaustion led to widespread insomnia. The connection between disturbed sleep and trauma highlights how survival was impacted not only by the body's need for rest, but by the overwhelming weight of the world around them. Finding comfort in chaos, the search for sleep and the human will to endure. The night wears on, and though the city is quieting, you remain wide awake, tangled in the disorienting thoughts that plague your mind. The distant sound of a bell tolling, a signal for another death, breaks the silence. But it's not the bell that disturbs you, it's the quiet, the unnatural stillness that follows. There's no denying it, the plague has claimed yet another soul, and soon the grim procession will begin again. But for now, in this moment, there's only you, your bed of straw, and the overwhelming silence of a world teetering on the edge of chaos. The faint, eerie glow of the moon seeps through the small window of your dwelling, casting long shadows across the room. Everything around you seems still, yet the very air feels charged with a sense of dread. In the absence of any comforting distractions, no soft firelight, no companions to share the night with, the silence becomes unbearable. You turn restlessly on your bed, trying to find some comfort, but it's nearly impossible. The weight of everything seems to press on you. The cold floor beneath you, the thin blanket that barely keeps out the chill, and the knowledge that the world around you is falling apart, make sleep seem like an unreachable dream. And yet, even in these dire circumstances, there is still a glimmer of hope, the human will to endure. It is this resilience that has carried people through the darkest times in history, and though it may not seem like it in the dead of night, it is what keeps you going. You are not simply lying here waiting for death. Your mind refuses to surrender. There's a sense of stubbornness, of holding on to the belief that the dawn will bring something better, even if it's just the briefest moment of relief from the constant struggle. In the medieval world, sleep was not only a physical need, but also a psychological one. People didn't just sleep to rest their bodies, they slept to preserve their sanity. For many, sleep became a temporary escape from the horrors around them, whether it was the distant sounds of battle, the endless coughing of the sick, or the constant fear of being next in line for the plague. Sleep offered at least a brief reprieve. The strange pattern of waking in the middle of the night and finding solace in those quiet moments before the second sleep had a healing effect, if only temporarily. In fact, sleep wasn't just an individual experience, it was a shared one. People in medieval times often slept in close quarters, sometimes with family members, sometimes with strangers, especially in the overcrowded towns and villages. This communal sleeping arrangement wasn't just a matter of convenience, it also provided a sense of connection during a time of extreme isolation. The very act of lying side by side with others, even in the most cramped and uncomfortable conditions, created a shared experience of vulnerability. It was in its own way a form of mutual comfort, a reminder that no one was truly alone in their struggle, even when the world outside felt like it was crumbling. Yet, even in these moments of shared humanity, there were still deep divisions. Those who lived in relative safety, perhaps protected by the walls of a castle or the wealth of their status, could afford to sleep more soundly. But for the majority of the population, the peasants, the labourers, the sick, sleep was something they could rarely take for granted. For them, sleep was a brief escape from a life marked by physical toil, poverty, and fear. It was a fleeting moment of peace in a world that offered very little in the way of comfort. And as the hours pass and the first light of dawn begins to break through the window, there is a slight shift in the atmosphere. The night may have felt endless, but it is drawing to a close. You feel the faintest stirrings of fatigue as your body, despite the anxiety and stress, finally gives in to the exhaustion. The human body has a remarkable ability to endure, to continue fighting against the odds, even when sleep seems impossible. The will to survive is a powerful force. The day will soon begin again, bringing with it the same challenges as yesterday. Perhaps more deaths, more sickness, more fear. But for now, in the dim light of morning, you find a brief moment of solace, a small sense of peace that comes from surviving the night. As your eyes finally close, you wonder, what will tomorrow bring? Will it be another day of fear and uncertainty, or will something change? Will the world ever return to a time when sleep could once again be a simple, restful escape? As you drift into sleep, your mind begins to quiet. The relentless worries of the night give way to the silence of rest, and in this moment you are able to find peace. But even as you sleep, you are reminded that survival in such times requires more than just physical endurance. It requires an unwavering will to keep going, even when sleep itself seems impossible. In this final section of Story 2, we explored the human ability to endure despite the physical and psychological toll of war and plague. Sleep, though difficult to achieve, became an essential part of survival, and the collective experience of shared sleep in medieval times provided comfort and resilience in a world filled with fear and uncertainty. The unspoken lives of medieval servants, when sleep was a luxury, the invisible struggle, sleep in the shadow of service. Imagine waking before the sun, before the roosters crow, in a room barely large enough for the straw mat you sleep on. The air is damp and cold, and the smell of unwashed bodies and the lingering scent of the day's work fills your lungs. You are not alone, though. Around you, other servants stir, their bodies as worn and tired as yours. The mansion or castle where you serve may seem grand from the outside, but inside there is little room for comfort, especially for those like you, who exist on the margins of its wealth. Your night is short and restless, for even in the dim light of early morning, the demands of the day begin to press in on you. There is no time for leisurely rest, no time to truly sleep through the night. The rich, those who live in the grand halls and enjoy the fruits of others' labour, sleep soundly in their soft beds, behind thick curtains and locked doors. But you, a servant, must rise early, often before the crack of dawn, to prepare the meals, light the fires, and tend to the needs of the household. Sleep is a luxury you cannot afford, for your body is constantly in motion, your hands always working, your mind always occupied by the endless tasks that come with servitude. The life of a servant in the medieval period was a far cry from the romanticized depictions of castles and noble life. While the lords and ladies slept in their comfortable chambers, Servants often slept in cramped, poorly ventilated rooms if they were fortunate enough to have a space of their own at all. Those who worked in kitchens or stables might sleep beside the very animals they tended, or in the servants' quarters, often located in the attic or basement, far from the warm hearths and luxurious comforts enjoyed by their masters. In these conditions, sleep becomes a fleeting and precious commodity. You work long hours, from sunrise to sunset, doing everything from preparing food to cleaning, from tending to the gardens to serving at feasts. And even when your work is done, there is little time for rest. The demands of the day have drained you, but your bed is little more than a hard surface, perhaps a thin blanket over straw, the cold air creeping in through the walls, the faint noise of the household still echoing in the distance. As you try to sleep, you can hear the creaking of floorboards above you, the hushed whispers of the noble family as they enjoy their evening in the warmth of their chambers. The silence in your room is only broken by the sounds of the house settling, footsteps in the halls, the faint sound of doors opening, the distant laughter of the wealthy as they relax after a long day. But you cannot rest in peace. Your body is weary, aching from the physical labor of the day, but your mind cannot truly shut off. There is always more to do tomorrow, always more to give. And in the midst of it all, sleep is often an afterthought. Even when you do manage to sleep, it is not the restful slumber of those who live in comfort. Your sleep is fragmented, interrupted by the cold, the noise, and the persistent feeling that you must remain alert. The slightest sound, the clang of a door, the distant murmur of conversation could keedle that you are needed. It's a constant state of hyper-awareness, one that prevents you from truly resting. In this life, sleep becomes something that must be earned. You might wait for a rare moment when the household is quiet, the demands of the day are done, and the family is asleep. But even then, you must stay vigilant, prepared to jump up at any moment if the need arises. Sleep, for the medieval servant, is not a given. It is something that is squeezed into the cracks of time, something to be savoured in fleeting moments. And as you lie there exhausted and restless, you begin to wonder, how long can you continue living this way? Will sleep ever feel like a true escape? Or is it just another part of the endless cycle of work and fatigue? Will you ever know what it feels like to sleep without the burden of constant vigilance? In this section, we've explored the life of a medieval servant and the challenges they faced when it came to sleep. The demands of servitude, the constant vigilance, and the uncomfortable living conditions made sleep a luxury that was often out of reach, a life without rest. The physical and mental toll of endless work. As the days stretch on, you begin to notice the toll that constant labor is taking on your body. The aches in your back, the throbbing in your hands, and the persistent soreness in your legs from hours of standing or moving heavy objects. All these signs of exhaustion are becoming a constant companion. But it's not just the physical weariness that takes its toll. It's the mental fatigue that comes with the never-ending cycle of work and restless sleep. In the early hours of the morning, while your masters remain tucked comfortably in their warm beds, you prepare to face another day. You roll out of your straw mattress, feeling the stiffness in your joints. The cold air bites at your skin as you gather your few belongings and head to the hearth to start the fire. The smell of burning wood fills your nostrils, and you can hear the crackling of the flames as they slowly begin to warm the room. But there's little warmth to be found in the life you lead. You've long since given up any hope of ever enjoying the luxury of a full night's rest. Your nights are fractured, filled with anxiety, the sound of creaking wood and distant footsteps, and the constant awareness that there is always something more to do. You wonder, sometimes, if you will ever know the comfort of lying down in a soft bed and truly resting, uninterrupted, undisturbed, and free from the obligations that seem to surround you at all times. Even as you go about your daily chores, sleep is never far from your thought. The lack of it starts to weigh on your mind, affecting your ability to focus and think clearly. Small mistakes begin to slip into your work, dropping dishes, forgetting a detail, losing your way during your chores, and it frustrates you. You can feel your mind slowing down, struggling to keep up with the endless demands of your position. But there's no time for rest, no time to recover from the mental strain. The other servants too bear the same weight. You share knowing glances, exchanged in silence. You all work through the same exhaustion, each of you silently carrying the burden of service while the noble family sleeps soundly upstairs. There's a shared understanding, a bond forged in the struggle for survival. But there is no room for camaraderie in the chaos. Everyone is too tired to engage in anything beyond the necessities of survival. You have no time to rest, no time to laugh, no time to experience the simple joys of life. As you pass through the halls, you can see the rich lounging in their comfortable quarters. They have soft beds, warm meals, and hours to rest, while you and your fellow servants scramble to meet their every need. Your masters eat their meals leisurely, and if they feel even the slightest discomfort, they ring for assistance. But you must endure, taking on the endless labor of caring for them, cleaning their rooms, preparing their food, and tending to their every whim. And as the night approaches again, the cycle begins once more. You finish your tasks, your body aching with every movement, and you collapse into bed, knowing full well that sleep will be a distant dream. The bed is hard, the room is cold, and even though you're physically exhausted, your mind cannot find peace. You may sleep for a few hours, but it's rarely a deep, restorative sleep. You wake frequently, disrupted by the faintest sounds, the door creaking, someone calling in the halls, or perhaps the very anxiety of your endless work pressing in on your mind. The lack of sleep begins to have its effects. It becomes harder to concentrate, to remember things, and to perform tasks as efficiently as you once did. The mental exhaustion starts to blur the line between the waking world and sleep. You forget simple things, misplace objects, and find yourself struggling to keep up with the work. The fatigue, both physical and mental, begins to wear you down. But even with the physical pain, the emotional exhaustion, and the relentless demands of your work, there is a deep sense of pride in what you do. You are a part of something larger, serving those who have power and wealth. Yet you are often invisible, your labor unnoticed. Your entire existence is built around serving others, with little room for personal comfort. There is no one to care for you, no one to tend to your exhaustion or mental fatigue. Despite all this, there is something human in your resilience. You keep moving, keep serving, keep enduring, even when every part of you cries out for rest. And maybe, just maybe, there is a flicker of hope, an unspoken understanding that this will one day end, and you will have the chance to rest, to sleep, to live without the burden of perpetual service. But until that day comes, you continue. In this section we explored the physical and mental toll of constant work and lack of sleep on medieval servants. Their struggle to find rest while tending to the needs of their wealthy masters offers a poignant reflection on the divide between the privileged and the labourers of the medieval world. The moment of rest, a glimpse of comfort in an unforgiving life. As the sun sets, the familiar exhaustion settles into your bones once again. Another long day of labour has come to an end, and though you can feel the weight of your tired body urging you to rest, the demands of the household are never truly finished. The master's bell rings in the distance, signalling that the family requires something else, more firewood, a fresh meal, or perhaps a messenger arriving with news. Sleep is still far away, but tonight is different. Tonight, there is a rare stillness in the air. The evening is quieter than usual, and the house feels less demanding. The fires are stoked, the floors cleaned, and the last of the evening tasks are completed. The noble family is upstairs engaged in their leisure, and the servants are left with rare moments of peace. For the first time in what feels like ages, there is nothing to do. The chores are finished and the household is finally silent, allowing you a brief, precious moment of stillness. In this fleeting moment, you finally lay down. The bed, still made of straw and rough wool, feels no softer than it did last night, but tonight it is a sanctuary. The body's exhaustion, built up from weeks of hard work and sleepless nights, washes over you as you close your eyes. There is a deep sense of relief, a temporary escape from the constant cycle of labor. For once you can breathe without thinking of the tasks that await you at dawn. But even in this rare moment of rest, the mind does not fully surrender. Thoughts of the next day, of what must be done, swirl through your mind. You can hear the soft rustling of fabric from the upper floors, the whispers of the household members. You know they are well rested, enjoying their comfortable sleep in plush beds. Your body longs for the same, but you are grateful for this rare stillness. the fleeting comfort that only comes when the demands of the world outside pause, if only for a moment. In the distance you can hear the howls of the wind, the rustle of trees outside the castle walls. The dark silence envelops you, and for a while you let go of the anxiety, the worry, the exhaustion that usually accompany the night. You know that this will not last, that the demands of tomorrow will bring more work, more fatigue, more exhaustion. But for now, you savor the moment. This is a rare opportunity to rest, even if the rest is imperfect. It's in these rare moments that sleep, while not deep or restorative, becomes a symbol of survival. Sleep, even when it comes in fragmented pieces, is an act of resilience. It is a symbol of the human will to endure, to keep moving forward, despite the exhaustion, despite the relentless labor that demands everything of you. Even in the face of hardship, even with the body tired and the mind weary, sleep offers a small moment of peace, a glimpse of comfort in an otherwise unforgiving life. Your eyelids grow heavy, and for the first time in what feels like forever, you slip into sleep, though it's not a deep sleep. It's restless, fitful, and interrupted, but it's sleep nonetheless. And in that brief time you are free, if only for a while, from the unending cycle of work and fatigue. You dream, but the dreams are fleeting and unclear. There are no grand visions or supernatural portents. Instead, your dreams are filled with simple, quiet moments. Walking through a lush field, lying under a tree, with the warmth of the sun on your face, or sitting by a peaceful fire, undisturbed by the weight of work or responsibility. These dreams, though ordinary, bring a sense of calm that your waking hours rarely do. But the moment passes, as all moments do. The first light of dawn begins to filter through the cracks in the walls, and with it, the world of work and labor beckons once again. The bell rings, signaling the start of another day. The reality of servitude rushes back, and the exhaustion you feel upon waking is immediate and overwhelming. Still, you rise. The rare moments of sleep, though fleeting, have given you just enough strength to face the demands of the day. You move through the tasks with the same quiet endurance, knowing that sleep will come again, if only for a few hours at the end of the day. What does it mean to endure, to continue despite the lack of rest? And in those rare moments of quiet, what is the true value of sleep in the life of a servant, when sleep is more than just rest, but a symbol of survival itself? As you prepare for the day ahead, you can't help but wonder, how long can you continue in this way, knowing that true rest will always be just out of reach? In this section, we've seen a rare moment of rest for a medieval servant, contrasting the rare peace with the relentless demands of their life. Sleep, though short and imperfect, becomes a symbol of endurance and survival. Sleep and ritual, the odd bedtimes and waking habits of royalty. The regal slumber, sleep as a privilege and a performance. Imagine waking up not in a cramped room with a thin straw mattress, but in a vast, ornate chamber, the scent of fresh linens filling the air. Sunlight filters softly through luxurious curtains, and the first sound you hear is not the shrill cry of a distant neighbor, but the faint rustle of attendants preparing for your day. As a royal, your bed is more than a place to rest. It is a statement of wealth, power, and control. Your sleep begins not at a simple hour, but with a series of rituals and expectations. The day starts with an elaborate routine, designed not only to ensure your comfort, but also to reinforce your status. Nobles and royalty in the medieval period did not have the simple luxury of falling asleep as peasants did. For them, sleep was a carefully managed affair, a performance for the eyes of the courtiers and servants who watched their every move. As the evening approaches, preparations for your sleep begin. You are surrounded by attendants who ensure that everything is in place. The bed is carefully arranged with layers of fine linens and velvet blankets, often lined with furs for added warmth. The room is illuminated by flickering candles and the soft glow of oil lamps, casting shadows on the ornate tapestries that hang from the walls. The servants move quietly, almost ceremoniously, as they prepare your chamber, ensuring that the temperature is perfect and that the atmosphere is conducive to a peaceful rest. In medieval courts, sleep was also a matter of etiquette. The times when royalty would retire to bed were often dictated by the social structure and the demands of the court. The hour of retiring was not a private decision, it was an event. The nobility would often retire early, long before the common folk, as a way to demonstrate their status. For some monarchs, the concept of bedtime was tied to their daily rituals of power and governance. The last moments of the day were not for rest alone, but for quiet reflection on their kingdom, their enemies, and their court. But these rituals were not merely for the comfort of the royals. Sleep was an act of political significance, a display of authority and control. During important events, even the act of retiring to bed was part of the performance. Monarchs would invite their closest advisors to witness their rest, or perhaps announce their intentions for the next day's battles or treaties. There was, after all, no such thing as privacy in these lavish, bustling courts. Every aspect of a royal's life was meant to be a spectacle, including the act of sleep. In many royal courts, it wasn't just about the lavishness of the bed, but the specific rituals that surrounded it. Some kings and queens had strict bedtime rituals that were followed meticulously, which included having specific attendants who would perform duties like making the bed, setting the temperature, or offering prayers for their well-being before sleep. In fact, the prayers before bed were considered necessary to protect the royal from the threats that could come at night, whether it was assassination, a betrayal, or a curse. The time spent preparing for sleep could last well into the evening, and by the time the royal finally lay down, the day's events had been absorbed, discussed, and planned for. However, the act of sleep itself was a marked contrast to the laborious, often uncomfortable rest of commoners. A royal's bed was a sanctuary, a place of rest, not just for the body, but for the weary mind. The hours of sleep allowed them to recharge and rejuvenate for the demanding days ahead. But for the most part, sleep in the royal household was not just about comfort, it was part of the ritualized pageantry that came with being at the top of the social ladder. In this section, we've seen the elaborate and ritualistic nature of sleep for royalty in medieval times, focusing on the extravagant preparations and the performative aspects of their rest. Sleep for them was far more than a simple biological need. It was a key part of maintaining their status. Midnight interruptions, the unseen terrors of royal sleep. As the royal household settles into the quiet of the night, the moonlight streaming softly through the tall windows, the idea of sleep, once a calm retreat, takes on an altogether different significance. While most people sleep to escape the hardships of the day, royals face a unique challenge. Their bed is a place not only of rest, but of vulnerability. For them, sleep could mean the peace of a restful night, but it could also bring the chaos of disruption, be it from plots, sickness, or supernatural fears. While common folk are preoccupied with the everyday struggles of survival, royalty must constantly be on guard. The threat of assassination, palace coups, and political unrest looms large in the minds of kings and queens. Their rest, while surrounded by luxury, is often interrupted by the harsh reality of their power. For example, during the reign of King Richard II of England, his sleep was disturbed by the constant fear of betrayal. Even within the sanctuary of his bedchamber, he couldn't escape the knowledge that some of those closest to him, his own counselors and nobles, might plot against him. In medieval courts, rumors of plots to assassinate the monarch were common, and these fears crept into the nightly routines of kings and queens. One story tells of King Charles VIII of France, who, plagued by dreams of his own death, began to sleep with his bodyguards at his side. He would also have servants on hand to check under the bed and around the room for any hidden dangers, as though a dagger might appear out of the darkness to end his reign. This constant vigilance made the royal sleep less restful, and far more fraught with anxiety. The situation wasn't much different for queens, who, although enjoying their own luxuries, were just as susceptible to the dangers of palace life. Queens like Catherine de' Medici, renowned for her political influence and her association with court intrigue, would sleep with close attendants keeping watch, often with the door locked behind them. The notion of sleeping with one eye open was a practical reality in such dangerous times, and though these queens had the luxury of soft, sumptuous beds, their sleep was rarely peaceful, often disturbed by thoughts of rivals, assassination, or even supernatural omens. Moreover, the royal sleep was often interrupted not only by the threat of human malice, but by the supernatural. In the medieval period, many believed that the night was a time when evil spirits and ghosts roamed freely. Royalty, with their vast influence and wealth, was seen as prime targets for these darker forces. Superstitions ran high, and the kings and queens who ruled over vast territories could not escape these beliefs. One of the most infamous superstitions of the time was that of night terrors, or nightmares, visions of spirits that would torment sleep. Kings often employed clergy to bless their beds, rooms, and even their sleep, to protect them from these supernatural forces, whether it was the threat of witches, restless spirits, or unseen curses. The royal bedchamber was a space fraught with fear. The stories of royal insomnia are not limited to the rich and powerful fearing for their lives. There are also accounts of kings and queens suffering from chronic sleep disturbances, sometimes brought on by guilt or stress. Richard III, for example, is often depicted in historical records as a man who struggled with sleeplessness and anxiety, partly due to the bloodshed of his reign and the crushing weight of his conscience. His inability to rest peacefully became a part of his legend, and sleep, instead of being a respite, became a torment, reflecting the psychological toll of wielding great power. The idea of a peaceful, undisturbed royal sleep is in many ways an illusion. For those at the top of the social hierarchy, the weight of their position, the constant need for vigilance, the awareness of enemies, and the fear of betrayal keeps their minds from the rest they crave. Even in the most comfortable surroundings, royal sleep is often interrupted by fears and stresses that the common folk could never imagine. As the hours stretch into the dark of night, with the royal court resting behind thick walls and guarded doors, the sounds of the palace quiet down, but the fear remains. Guards keep watch, attendants remain alert, and even the light of the moon feels like a silent witness to the vulnerability of those who live in the lap of luxury. Theirs is a sleep fraught with tension, ever haunted by the realization that their power and their life could be stolen away in an instant. In the stillness of the night, it becomes clear, sleep, for royalty, is not simply a necessary respite from the duties of the day. It is a precarious balance of comfort and fear, peace and anxiety. They may sleep on soft silks, but their slumber is often filled with nightmares of both earthly and supernatural origins. And in these restless nights, the crown becomes more of a burden than a symbol of power. In this section, we explored the unseen challenges that royals faced when it came to sleep, how their nightly rest was often filled with fear, anxiety, and the weight of their power. Despite the luxuries surrounding them, their sleep was far from peaceful, constantly interrupted by the threats they faced from both human enemies and the supernatural. The royal repose, a strange duality of sleep and power. As the dawn approaches, the palace stirs. The first light of morning creeps through the curtains, casting long shadows across the grand rooms. The royals, still asleep in their luxurious chambers, are slowly waking from their restless slumber. Their sleep is interrupted not only by the common noise of the palace, but also by the responsibilities that await them as rulers. For them, rest is a fleeting moment in a day that is dominated by governance, war, and the ceaseless demands of those who serve them. Yet, as the royal family begins to wake, there is something almost symbolic in the way their slumber contrasts with the lives of the people they rule. While the rest of the kingdom labors through exhaustion and hardship, the royals are provided with the most opulent environments to sleep in. Soft silks, the finest linens and feather-stuffed pillows await them, yet their sleep is filled with interruption, anxiety, and the knowledge that their lives are not their own. The duality of royal sleep, luxurious on the outside, filled with tension on the inside, speaks to the very nature of power itself. For the nobility, sleep was not merely a form of rest, but a means of maintaining their status. In fact, the timing and quality of sleep could reflect the health of the realm and the monarchy. If a king or queen was well rested, it was seen as a sign of a well-governed country, an image of control, calm, and stability. However, if their sleep became troubled or disrupted, it was often interpreted as a symbol of a kingdom in distress. Royal insomnia was not just a personal ailment, it was a political statement. The public in many cases looked to the ruler's behavior to gauge the overall mood of the court, and by extension the realm. In this way, royal sleep was intertwined with the very fabric of monarchy. The importance of sleep became more than a simple biological necessity. It became part of a performance, a spectacle that reflected the ruler's power and their ability to maintain control over the kingdom. The very act of sleeping, when done properly, was an indicator of a ruler's mental fortitude, but when sleep became disrupted by stress, nightmares, or sleeplessness, It was seen as a weakness, an indication that the monarch was losing grip on their power. The court, of course, would take notice, and the atmosphere would change accordingly. Despite the luxuries of royal sleep, it was far from restful. As we have seen in the lives of kings like Richard III, the weight of responsibility could weigh so heavily that sleep became elusive. In fact, many royal figures struggled with periods of insomnia due to the immense pressure of their position. The knowledge that their every decision could impact the lives of thousands, the looming threats of enemies at court, and the constant maneuvering of political rivals left them awake at night, turning over every decision in their minds. In the case of monarchs like King Henry VIII of England, his sleep was often filled with restless nights due to his turbulent reign and his constant personal struggles. He was known for his volatile mood swings and constant concerns over his legacy, which kept him awake many nights. He would often retire to bed late, his mind racing with thoughts of political intrigue, royal succession, and his troubled marriages. For Henry, and for many monarchs like him, sleep was not a time to rest, but a time to reflect on the burdens they carried. And yet, even in their sleepless nights, the monarchy continued to perform the roles they were born into. Their royal chambers remained a spectacle, always perfectly arranged, always ready for their presence, always designed to reflect their power. The luxury of the royal bed was not merely for rest, but to send a message to the kingdom. This is the life of power, and this is how power should be revered. The bed was a throne in its own right, a place where rulers lay down not just their bodies, but the weight of their authority. As the morning progresses, the royal family rises, sometimes reluctantly, often slowly. Despite their momentary respite, the duties of the day beckon. Attendants rush to help them dress, prepare their meals, and take care of the myriad tasks that come with maintaining their room. The luxurious sleep they enjoyed the night before is left behind as they don their crowns and face the day. And yet, even with the weight of the crown, the question lingers: was their sleep truly restful, or was it only a temporary escape from the responsibilities, the threats, and the ever-present pressure of maintaining their reign? For the royal household, sleep is both a privilege and a burden. It is the necessary pause between the endless demands of leadership, but it is also an echo of the vulnerability they cannot escape. Even in their deepest sleep, monarchs are haunted by the knowledge that their power is fragile, and that tomorrow might bring new challenges, new threats, and demands. The palace may be luxurious, but sleep for the royal family is always a reminder of the very human fragility beneath the grandeur. In this final section, we've explored the strange duality of royal sleep, luxurious in form, but fraught with the stresses and anxieties that come with power. The performance of sleep within the royal court symbolizes the tension between comfort and the constant pressure of leadership. Nights under the stars, how rural folk slept through the dark ages. A simple life, the struggle for rest in the country. Picture yourself in a small rural village in the early medieval period, surrounded by the sounds of the countryside, chirping crickets, rustling leaves, the occasional distant call of a farm animal. Your bed is nothing more than a rough-hewn blanket spread out over a bed of straw, tucked away in a humble, one-room cottage. The room is dimly lit by the flickering light of a single candle or a fire in the hearth. The air smells faintly of earth, wood smoke, and the animals kept in the nearby barn. The life of a rural villager is simple, yet relentlessly hard. You wake up before the sun rises, sometimes as early as 4 or 5 a.m., depending on the time of year. The first thing you do is tend to your animals, cows, chickens, maybe a few sheep, and then begin the labor of the day, gathering firewood, ploughing fields, or helping with the harvest. The work is constant, and your body is weary long before the sun begins to set. By the time the evening arrives, you've already put in a full day of physical labor. Your body aches, and your muscles scream for rest. But rest doesn't come easily. There is little time for relaxation. For the moment the work is done, there's still food to prepare, children to care for, and the ongoing concerns of survival to consider. As darkness falls, the temperature drops rapidly, and the house, made of stone or timber, does little to keep the cold out. The flickering candlelight casts long shadows on the walls, and you find a space to lie down, but even in your exhaustion, sleep doesn't come easily. The bed is uncomfortable, and the cold is seeping into your bones. You roll over, trying to find a more comfortable position, but the straw beneath you shifts, and you're once again aware of the roughness of your bed. There is no real peace in sleep for you. Instead, it's more of an escape, an essential pause from the demands of the day, but a difficult one to achieve. Your cottage is small, and you are not alone. Family members, sometimes multiple generations, share the same space. You sleep in close quarters with your children, siblings, or sometimes even your parents. The privacy afforded to the wealthier classes, with separate chambers and soft, luxurious beds, is a distant luxury. Here, sleep is something to be carved out amidst the demands of family, chores, and survival. The sounds of the night, the wind howling through the cracks in the walls, the occasional bark of a dog, or the distant bleat of a sheep, serve as constant reminders that there is no true peace. The comfort of sleep is not a given, it is a fleeting moment of rest before the cycle of labor starts all over again. Though you may be exhausted from the day's work, the weariness that takes over your body doesn't always translate into rest. You wonder as you lie there in the darkness, how long it will be before you can sleep without these constant interruptions. Perhaps the weather will change, or perhaps you'll finally have a soft mattress instead of a bed of straw. But for now, you close your eyes, knowing that the work of the next day will begin long before dawn. In this section, we've delved into the challenging sleep experiences of rural folk during the Dark Ages, focusing on the physical discomfort and exhaustion that defined their rest. Sleep was a brief escape from the demands of a physically grueling life, but rarely a restful one. Would you like to continue with section 2 of this story? Nature's Clock, the rhythms of rural sleep. As you lie awake, you can hear the distant rustling of the trees and the occasional call of a night bird. The moonlight flickers through the gaps in the thatched roof, casting an eerie, silver glow across the room. It's a night much like any other, quiet and still, but for you it's far from peaceful. The sleep that should come as a reprieve from the long day of work is elusive, and the passing hours stretch out like an endless wait. The struggle for rest in the countryside isn't just about physical comfort, it's about aligning yourself with the rhythms of nature. In medieval rural communities, sleep was dictated by the rise and fall of the sun. There were no clocks, no electric lights, and little in the way of nighttime entertainment. When the sun set, the workday ended, and the darkness of the night fell quickly upon the land. You would retire to bed with the first signs of dusk, but sleep didn't come right away. The day's tasks lingered in your mind. Perhaps you're worried about the harvest, or the condition of the animals, or the looming weather that might ruin your crops. Even in the quiet dark of night, there was no true escape from the concerns of the day. As night deepens, you finally begin to drift into a fitful sleep, but you're never far from the waking world. Your senses remain alert, honed by years of living in such a vulnerable environment. The slightest sound, perhaps the scurrying of a rodent in the walls, or the distant sound of a wolf howling, might wake you. In the rural medieval world, sleep was not a time of pure rest. It was a time when you had to remain aware, even in your slumber, of the world outside. But it wasn't just the physical and mental demands of rural life that shaped the sleep of medieval peasants. The natural world had a profound influence on how they rested. The rhythms of nature, the cycle of seasons, and the availability of daylight all played a role in their sleep pattern. For example, in the winter months, the days were short and the nights were long. People tended to sleep longer during the colder months, often up to 12 hours a night. The lack of daylight meant there was less to do after sundown, so sleep became a longer, more natural part of the daily rhythm. In contrast, the summer months, with their long days and intense heat, saw a different pattern. People in rural areas would rise very early, working hard during the cooler morning hours, and would often take a break during the hottest part of the day, in the late afternoon. The heat of the day and the long hours of sunlight meant that people often worked until late into the evening, with sleep coming much later. During these times, sleep was still fragmented. People would often take a first sleep at dusk, only to wake up in the middle of the night, ready for a second sleep. This split sleep pattern was common in rural areas, where the rhythms of nature and the demands of physical labor made continuous sleep difficult. For the rural folk, sleep was shaped by necessity, not comfort. In the stillness of the night, with the sounds of nature surrounding you, your sleep is often interrupted by the rhythms of the world outside. You sleep not just to recover from the day's labor, but to prepare yourself for the work ahead. The seasons dictate your rest, the day's work shapes your slumber, and nature itself governs when you sleep and when you wake. Even when the sleep you get is short or disrupted, there is a sense of contentment. It's not about luxury or comfort, but about survival and living in harmony with the natural world. And when the morning comes, you rise again to face the demands of the land, knowing that sleep will come when it comes, but only after the work of the day has been done. In this section, we've explored how rural folk in medieval times adapted their sleep to the rhythms of nature. The demands of the seasons, the timing of work, and the necessity of being alert at all times shaped their sleep habits, making rest a precious but often disrupted experience. The forgotten rest, sleep and resilience in the rural life. As the first light of dawn begins to creep into your small cottage, you slowly stir from your fragmented sleep. The night has been long, filled with restlessness and brief moments of reprieve, but your body knows it must rise again. The cycle of labor and life continues. Outside, the rooster crows, signaling the start of another day in the rhythm of rural life. You lie there for a moment, feeling the stiffness in your muscles, the ache in your bones from the previous day's hard work. Despite the discomfort of your rest, there is a quiet strength in the way you wake. You are not awake because you want to be, but because survival demands it. Sleep for you is not a luxury or a comfort, but a necessity. Each night, you fall into sleep hoping for a brief moment of peace, but even in your sleep, you are tethered to the demands of the day. Your sleep is earned through toil, not given freely by the world around you. There are no lavish bedchambers in your world, no soft mattresses or warm sheets. Instead, your bed is made of straw, spread over the cold, hard ground, and covered with a rough woolen blanket. It is a bed meant for survival, not for comfort. And yet, in this simplicity, there is a certain resilience. The hard, uncomfortable rest you find on that bed of straw is what allows you to continue, day after day, doing the work that keeps the household alive. The weariness, the discomfort, and the broken sleep are all part of this endurance. And still, even in the hardest times, you manage to find moments of peace. The quiet of the countryside, away from the noise of the cities and the courts, offers you the solace of nature. There's something deeply calming about hearing the wind rustling through the trees, the distant sounds of birds, or the soft hum of your own breathing. These sounds, though simple and ordinary, create an environment where sleep, despite its imperfections, feels almost sacred. There is no need for excess, no need for luxury. In the quiet of the night, you find a rhythm that suits you, one that is dictated by the world around you, not by the whims of court or city life. In a way, the sleep you get in the rural world is the truest form of rest. It is not tainted by the anxieties and fears that plague the nobility. It is not disturbed by the constant interruptions of politics, war, or courtly drama. The only thing that interrupts your sleep is the natural cycle of life: rain, wind, animal sounds, and the inevitable needs of the farm. Your rest is dictated by what the world around you requires. And in this simplicity, there is both peace and struggle. Sleep for rural folk is never a perfect escape. There is always something more to do, something to worry about, and the demands of nature never cease. Yet it is a necessary part of the human experience, a cycle of work and rest that sustains life. The rural life is one of constant labor, but also of quiet resilience. Sleep may be brief and uncomfortable, but it is earned, and in that, there is a sense of dignity. You sleep to rise again, to do the work that keeps you alive. And when you awaken, even though you may be tired, you are ready to face another day. You know that when the day ends, the rest will come again, and with it, a brief escape from the labor of life. Even if it's just a few hours of rest before the cycle begins again, sleep offers the quietest form of resilience. It is a time when the body heals, even if only for a short while, and prepares for the work to come. And in this simple act of sleep, there is a subtle strength, the strength to endure, to survive, and to live in harmony with the world around you. As the morning fully arrives, you rise, stretch your sore limbs, and prepare to face the day's work. Another cycle begins, and another night of rest will come. It may not be perfect, but it will be yours. And so the rhythm of life continues. with each night offering a brief moment of peace before the cycle of labor begins again. In this final section, we've explored the deeper resilience of rural life, where sleep is a necessary but imperfect part of a labor-filled existence. The simplicity of rural sleep, its reliance on nature's rhythms, and the quiet endurance required to survive in such an environment, shape the way rest is experienced. Monastic silence. The quiet, eerie world of medieval monks and nuns, a sacred routine, the rhythm of sleep in the monastic life. Imagine waking in the cold stillness of a stone cell, the chill of the early morning seeping through the thick walls. The sun has not yet risen, and the only light in your room comes from the faint glow of a candle flickering on the small wooden table beside your bed. You are a monk or a nun, living in a medieval monastery or convent, where life is governed by strict rules, rituals, and a profound sense of devotion. Sleep for you is not merely a luxury or a respite from the day's work. It is a sacred part of your religious life, dictated by the bell that calls you to prayer. From the moment you awake, you are reminded that your life is not your own. It belongs to God. The hours of sleep you get are measured, not by the ticking of a clock, but by the call of the bells and the rituals that have been passed down through centuries. Monastic life is one of routine, and sleep is no exception. In many monasteries, the bell would ring at fixed hours, often in the middle of the night, calling the monks and nuns to prayer. There were no lazy mornings, no sleeping in. Instead, the day would begin with the office of matins, a long and solemn prayer that began before dawn. Monks and nuns would rise from their hard, uncomfortable beds, often little more than straw placed over wooden planks or simple wooden frames. The cell was sparse. There were no luxuries, no soft blankets, no down pillows. It was a place for contemplation and devotion, not for comfort. You quickly rise from your bed and begin your morning routine, moving quietly through the stone corridors to join the others for prayers. The air is damp, and the cold cuts through your thin habit. The monastery is silent, except for the sound of footsteps on the stone floor and the soft murmur of prayer. This is your world, now, the quiet, eerie world of monastic silence. Each day is a cycle of prayer, work, and study, and even the act of sleep is steeped in religious meaning. Your bed is austere, and the sleep you get is never deep. The constant rhythm of prayer, combined with the hard work of maintaining the monastery, leaves little room for restful sleep. Sleep is not seen as a time for indulgence, but as a necessary period of rest for the body and soul. Your time in bed is brief, and sleep itself is often broken up by the call to prayer. The idea of sleeping in is foreign to you. Instead, you have learned to sleep in small, fragmented intervals, always ready to rise when the bell calls. Despite the discomfort of your bed, there is a strange peace in the routine. The quiet of the monastery, the absence of distractions, the strict adherence to the prayer schedule, all combine to create a world where the body's need for sleep becomes intertwined with the soul's need for peace. But even in this silence, you are never truly alone. The presence of your fellow monks or nuns, all living in the same disciplined manner, offers a sense of shared purpose, but also a feeling of collective silence. The life of a monk or nun is marked by a strange quietness, where even sleep is part of a greater rhythm. The act of lying down to rest is never just about relaxing. It's about giving your body the necessary rest it needs to continue the work of prayer, reflection, and service. Every moment, from waking to sleeping, is filled with a deep sense of devotion. The stillness of the night, the lack of distractions, and the never-ending cycle of prayer create an environment where sleep becomes as much a part of the divine rhythm as the prayers themselves. In this section, we explored the austere nature of monastic sleep, focusing on the religious significance and strict routines that defined the sleep habits of monks and nuns. Their sleep, though necessary, was secondary to their spiritual duties, and was a part of the greater cycle of devotion. The sacrificial nature of sleep, the struggles of silence and rest. As the night deepens, the routine of monastic life presses on. The sounds of the bell have echoed through the monastery, and you rise once again from your cold bed. The air in the cloister is damp, and the dim light from the flickering candle casts long shadows across the stone walls. You've had only a few hours of rest, But sleep has never been a true retreat. The quiet of the monastery offers little comfort in your bed. Its stiffness and discomfort are reminders that rest is not meant for the body, but for the spirit. Monks and nuns live in a world where sleep is seen as an interruption to their spiritual duties. Theirs is a life of discipline, sacrifice, and unwavering devotion, where every action is meant to glorify God. Sleep in this world is a necessary evil, a temporary respite, so that they may serve better when awake. The notion of restful sleep, of lying comfortably in bed and forgetting the world, is alien to the monastic ideal. Even in the stillness of the night, as you attempt to rest, your thoughts drift toward prayer and devotion. You are always conscious of your vows and your purpose, even in those rare fleeting moments of sleep. The restless night becomes a metaphor for the struggle between physical needs and spiritual ideal. The desire for comfort, for deep, undisturbed rest, is constantly at odds with the life you've chosen, a life that demands sacrifice at every turn. Sleep is divided in the monastic routine. There is no single stretch of uninterrupted rest. Instead, monks and nuns often sleep in segments called first sleep and second sleep. The first sleep is brief, typically lasting just a few hours before the bell calls for the office of matins, the first of the daily prayers, which could begin at 2 or 3 a.m. After the first prayers, the monastic community would return to bed for another period of sleep, known as the second sleep. This split sleep pattern, though exhausting, has a practical side. It aligns with the rhythm of prayer and allows time for contemplation during the night. But this split sleep comes with its own struggles. It is difficult for the body to rest properly when sleep is interrupted, and the mind, though often disciplined, can grow weary. The lack of deep, uninterrupted rest has a physical toll: tired eyes, aching muscles, a foggy mind. And yet, these physical discomforts are not seen as burdens, but as part of the process of sanctification. Sleep becomes a small sacrifice, something that must be endured in order to devote more time to prayer and service. There are no comforts, no luxuries in this sleep. The walls of your cell are bare, and the rough straw that covers the floor serves only as a physical barrier between you and the cold stone beneath. The temperature drops dramatically during the night, and there are no soft blankets or warming devices to offer comfort. You sleep as you live, humbly, in service. Every movement in bed is a reminder of the simplicity of your existence. Your mind, even as it drifts towards sleep, is tethered to your vows, to the rituals of the day, and to the divine purpose that keeps you bound to this monastic life. But even in this discomfort, there is a strange peace. Though your body suffers from lack of proper rest, your soul finds solace in the rhythm of life that sleep is a part of. Every action, even the simplest, is performed with the intention of honoring God. The simplicity of your sleep, its interruptions and its discomforts, are not burdens but opportunities for spiritual reflection. Sleep is not for the body but for the spirit, and this small sacrifice is seen as an offering to the divine. In the dark of the night, with only the light of a single candle casting shadows on the walls, you lie in your cell. You are alone, but you are never truly lonely. The silence is thick, yet full of the prayers that have been whispered and the thoughts that have been shared in the sacred hours of the night. As you close your eyes for the second sleep, you wonder, does your sacrifice of comfort make your soul more open to divine grace? Will the broken sleep of the night bring you closer to God, or is it simply another trial to bear, another piece of the monastic puzzle that you must endure for the sake of devotion? In this section, we delved deeper into the challenging sleep conditions of monks and nuns, exploring how sleep is not just interrupted by prayer, but is inherently a part of their spiritual discipline. Their physical discomfort and fragmented rest are sacrifices made in service to a higher purpose. Dreams and divinity. The sacred nature of sleep in monastic life. As the final hours of night stretch on, the monastery remains steeped in a profound silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of a habit or the faint whisper of a prayer being spoken in the darkness. The long days of labor, prayer, and contemplation leave you weary, yet there is a certain sacredness to the rest you now seek. For monks and nuns, sleep is not a simple act of rest, but a sacred ritual in itself, intertwined with the divine and the sacred duty of service. Despite the physical discomfort that defines monastic sleep, its interruptions, its briefness and its reliance on the will of the bell. There is a spiritual significance in these fragmented hours of rest. Sleep becomes a quiet reflection of divine grace, a moment to surrender to the rhythm of the universe, even as the body fights against its own exhaustion. It is said that sleep, in monastic life, serves not only the body, but the soul, providing a chance for renewal, albeit in the most humble of circumstances. During sleep, monks and nuns are encouraged to surrender their will to God. Their dreams, too, are seen through a spiritual lens. Medieval monks and nuns often believed that dreams were messages, visions sent by God to guide their lives, or warn them of dangers. The sacred nature of their lives infused even their sleep, making it a sacred time where they could commune with God in ways that were beyond the waking world. Sleep, despite its uncomfortable nature, offered them a space where the divine could speak. One particularly powerful belief in monastic communities was that of divine dreams, visions that were seen as messages directly from God. These dreams were not mere products of the mind's wandering. They were sacred experiences that held deep spiritual meaning. If a monk or nun dreamt of a particular saint, for instance, it was believed to be a sign of divine favor or guidance. Dreams of angels, or even Christ, were seen as confirmation of one's devotion and spiritual path. In fact, many monks and nuns kept records of their dreams, writing down what they had seen in the hopes that their visions would reveal hidden truths or divine messages. Even when sleep itself was broken and restless, it was often considered a blessing in disguise, a time when God was shaping their souls, purging the distractions of the world, and preparing them for the work ahead. As much as the discomfort of sleep could be a burden, it was also seen as an opportunity to purify the soul. In these moments, when the body was not fully at rest, the spirit was free to rise and commune with the divine. The struggle for sleep became in itself a form of spiritual discipline. Some monastic orders even incorporated the concept of sacred sleep into their teachings. For example, certain groups practiced specific bedtime rituals intended to align themselves more closely with God's will. Before retiring to sleep, a monk might spend time in silent prayer, meditating on the day's work and seeking forgiveness for any imperfections. Nuns, too, would often end their day with a prayer of thanksgiving, offering their sleep to God as a form of spiritual surrender. Yet, despite the purity of these intentions, sleep was never fully free from discomfort. The simple beds, the cold stone floors, and the lack of warmth left a tangible physical toll on the body. But this, too, was part of the offering. The sacrifice of rest was seen as a way to honor God, to show dedication, and to cultivate a humble spirit. In fact, some monastic rules even instructed members to avoid overly indulgent sleep or rest, teaching that too much sleep was a sign of laziness or spiritual weakness. The ideal was always a balance between the needs of the body and the demands of the soul, a constant struggle between physical discomfort and spiritual devotion. As the hours stretch on, and you finally drift into the second sleep, the quiet stillness of the monastery surrounds you. You sleep not only to heal the body, but to nourish the soul. In this sacred time, dreams take on new significance. Perhaps you dream of angels, or of a vision of Christ. Perhaps you are visited by a saint whose words resonate deeply within you. These dreams, though they may be fleeting and enigmatic, serve as spiritual nourishment, guiding you in your devotion and offering a glimpse into the divine. When you wake, it is to the sound of the bell, calling you once again to prayer. The cycle begins again. Despite the briefness of the sleep, despite the discomfort, there is a profound sense of peace. The fragmented rest you receive in your cell is not just for the body, but for the soul. It is through this restless sleep that you find your path to God, and it is through the interruptions of the night that you come closer to understanding your place in the divine order. Sleep in the monastic life is not just a time to rest the body, it is a time to listen, to receive messages, and to prepare for the sacred work that awaits you in the light of day. It may be uncomfortable, fragmented and interrupted, but in its humble simplicity, it is a sacred time of renewal. In this final section, we've explored how monastic sleep was intertwined with spirituality and the divine. Despite its discomfort and interruptions, sleep served a higher purpose, offering both physical rest and spiritual renewal. Dreams and the rituals around sleep became integral to the monastic experience, allowing monks and nuns to align themselves more closely with God. Strange slumber, The role of dreams and superstition in medieval sleep. The nightmares of the supernatural, dreams as portents in medieval life. In medieval times, sleep was never just a physical act of rest. It was a gateway to the supernatural. The line between the waking world and the world of spirits, demons, and divine visions was thin, and many believed that sleep was the time when these forces could most easily reach into the lives of ordinary people. As you close your eyes and surrender to the darkness, you are not simply resting. You are entering a realm where dreams are not just random flickers of your mind, but sacred messages, warnings, or even threats from the unknown. The medieval mind was deeply superstitious, and sleep, often the most vulnerable state of being, was viewed as a time when one's soul was most at risk. Those who lay down at night could expect not just peaceful dreams, but strange, mysterious, and sometimes terrifying experience. Sleep was no refuge, it was a battleground of the mind. The medieval world saw dreams as omens, messages from God or from evil spirits, and the fear of the supernatural could rob people of rest. One of the most common medieval fears was the experience of being nightmared or oppressed during sleep. People often believed that witches or evil spirits would come into their homes at night and sit on their chests, making it difficult for them to breathe or move. This condition, known today as sleep paralysis, was often interpreted as the work of demons or malevolent forces that would disturb one's rest and even cause nightmares. In many cases, people would pray before bed, hang protective charms, or place holy relics around their sleeping area to ward off these spirits. But not all dreams were seen as negative. Some were believed to be prophetic, offering glimpses of the future or divine guide. If you dreamt of an angel or a holy he, it was thought to be a message of good fortune or a sign of God's favor. These dreams could influence decisions, warn of impending dangers, or reassure people about the future. The medieval world took its dreams seriously, and many common folk kept dream journals to record their visions, believing that by doing so, they could better understand their relationship with the divine or the supernatural. The fear of demons and the supernatural extended beyond mere nightmare. People also believed that sleep was the time when their soul left their body, wandering into other realms. Some believed that during sleep, the soul would be free to explore the heavens, the underworld, or even the realm of the dead. In these places, the soul might encounter angels or demons, and the dreams that followed would reflect these spiritual encounters. If a person dreamed of hellish fire or grotesque images, it was seen as a sign of their soul being in danger, or perhaps a warning that they needed to repent for their sins. And then there were the ominous dreams that had no clear source. The medieval people were deeply affected by the constant threat of death, disease, and war, and these fears often manifested in their dreams. It wasn't uncommon for people to dream of sickness or death, sometimes even of their own death or the death of someone close to them. In times of plague or famine, such dreams were especially prevalent, as people struggled to understand the invisible threats around them. For many, a dream of death or disease was seen as a forewarning, something to prepare for or fear. These superstitions were not limited to the common folk. Even royalty and clergy feared the power of dreams. Kings and queens, who wielded great power, often relied on dreams to guide their decisions. A dream that foretold the fall of a kingdom or the death of a monarch could send shockwaves through the court. Rulers would sometimes consult with priests, mystics, or wise women to interpret dreams, hoping to gain insight into their future. As superstition and religion were deeply intertwined in medieval life, the influence of dreams extended far beyond the personal realm and into the very heart of governance. In the medieval world, sleep was not simply a break from the work of the day, it was a doorway to another realm. The strange and unsettling dreams that came with sleep were viewed as powerful forces, shaping the waking world as much as the events of the day. Whether prophetic, warning, or terrifying, dreams were taken seriously and were believed to hold meaning that transcended the physical world. In this section, we've explored the role of dreams and the supernatural in medieval sleep, focusing on the widespread belief in omens, nightmares, and divine messages during sleep. Dreams were an essential part of how people understood the world and their place in it, filled with both fear and significance. Nightmares and visions, the supernatural impact on medieval lives. As the night deepens, the weight of the day's concerns fades into the subconscious. But in the medieval mind, it was not merely the daily anxieties that filled the mind during sleep. It was the presence of supernatural forces, both protective and malevolent. For many in the medieval period, the world was full of invisible dangers that lurked just beyond the veil of the waking world. The moment sleep began, a person could enter an entirely different realm, where dreams were not just fleeting thoughts but tangible forces, full of meaning and power. Nightmares were a common affliction in this world, and the fear of them was pervasive. The medieval concept of a nightmare was far different from what we understand today. A nightmare was thought to be the direct result of demonic influence or the presence of evil spirits in the room. Many people believed that witches or malevolent spirits would visit them during sleep, sitting on their chests and suffocating them, or appearing as terrifying creatures that could cause physical harm. This experience of being pressed was seen as an indication that one was under spiritual attack, and it was often interpreted as a sign of moral or spiritual failure. People tried various remedies to avoid these supernatural visitations. Amulets, charms, and incantations were common tools to ward off the evil spirits thought to be responsible for nightmares. Prayer before bed was another way to seek protection from the spiritual realm, as was the practice of sleeping with religious objects like crucifixes or holy water close at hand. Some monks and nuns would even recite special prayers to ensure a peaceful night's sleep, while others would go to sleep with candles burning, believing that the light would drive away evil spirits. In addition to demonic nightmares, people also feared dreams of death. These dreams were deeply unsettling, often foretelling the death of the dreamer, a loved one, or even a king or noble. During times of plague, when death seemed inevitable, dreams of the dead were especially prevalent. People believed that the dead had the ability to communicate with the living through dreams, and such visions were considered to be a message from the spirit world. Many saw these dreams as warnings, urging the dreamer to change their behavior or take action before it was too late. If a person dreamed of death, it could indicate a need to confess their sins, repent, or take some other form of spiritual action. Dreaming of a deceased family member or friend was seen as a powerful omen, a message to prepare for their passing or to perform certain rites in their honor. The most terrifying nightmares were those that involved the devil. The medieval period was deeply religious, and the fear of hellfire and damnation loomed large over the minds of the faithful. To dream of the devil, of hellfire, or of demonic creatures was a dreadful experience. It was believed that these dreams were a form of spiritual warfare, a sign that the dreamer's soul was under threat. People who had such dreams would often visit their local priest for counsel, seeking guidance on how to rid themselves of the evil influences they felt were affecting their sleep. These dreams, they believed, were not just visions. They were real warnings from the spiritual world, and their significance could not be ignored. In contrast, there were also good dreams, those seen as divine messages or visions sent by angels. Such dreams were interpreted as signs of God's favor, often guiding people toward a path of righteousness. Dreams in which angels appeared or when Christ was seen were considered sacred, as were dreams that foretold victories in battle or the success of important endeavors. Kings and nobles, in particular, relied on these divine dreams to guide their decision-making, interpreting them as signs of God's will. For example, some kings believed that their victory in battle was prophesied through dreams, and they would often act on them, believing that they were fulfilling a divine mandate. In the court of King Henry VI of England, it was widely believed that his dreams were prophetic. His dreams of certain saints and angels were interpreted as signs of divine support for his rule, bolstering his legitimacy as monarch. Similarly, Queen Margaret of Anjou reportedly dreamt of a vision of the Virgin Mary, which was seen as an omen of victory for her forces during the Wars of the Roses. While dreams of the supernatural were often feared, they were also relied upon as sources of guidance and direction, particularly by those in positions of power. Yet despite these positive dreams, the fear of nightmares and demonic forces was a constant shadow over medieval life. The belief that sleep was a time when one's soul was vulnerable to attack made the act of resting a fearful one. People did not see sleep as a simple biological necessity. They saw it as an act fraught with spiritual significance. Sleep in the medieval world was a realm where the living and the dead met, where angels and demons fought for dominion over the soul. For many, these beliefs were not just light superstition. The fear of the supernatural was very real, and the experiences of nightmares and divine dreams were taken as literal signs of spiritual activity. These fears and beliefs shaped the way people lived, the way they prepared for sleep, and the way they interpreted the events of their nightly rest. In a world where the line between the physical and spiritual was blurred, dreams became more than just visions. They were powerful forces that shaped both the waking and sleeping lives of medieval people. In this section, we've explored how medieval people viewed dreams and nightmares as powerful supernatural forces, both feared and revered. Nightmares were seen as spiritual threats, while divine dreams were viewed as sacred omens. These beliefs heavily influenced daily life, sleep practices, and even political decisions. Sleep as a portal, superstition, protection, and the rituals of medieval rest. In the depths of medieval superstition, sleep became far more than just a time of rest. It was seen as a portal, a doorway through which the living could commune with the dead, interact with spirits, or receive divine messages. As a result, people spent a great deal of time preparing for sleep, invoking protective measures, and performing rituals to safeguard themselves from the supernatural forces they believed lurked in the dark. For the average person, the fear of the unknown in the nighttime hours was palpable. The medieval church played a significant role in shaping people's perceptions of sleep and the supernatural. Most people believed that while they slept, their souls were vulnerable. The church's teachings suggested that prayer, holy objects, and religious rituals could protect one's soul during sleep, preventing evil spirits from causing harm. One of the most common ways to protect oneself from the perceived dangers of sleep was to invoke divine protection. A popular medieval practice was to sleep with a prayer or incantation on the lips, or to recite certain psalms before bed. Psalm 91, known as the Psalm of Protection, was often chanted or read aloud before sleep. It was believed that invoking the protection of God, angels, and saints would ward off any evil forces attempting to enter one's dreams. People also turned to amulets and relics as physical forms of protection during sleep. Small crosses, holy water, and even bones of saints were placed under pillows or hung above the bed to safeguard against evil spirits. These items were believed to have a direct connection to divine power, and were thought to offer protection not only during sleep, but also against illness, witchcraft, and demonic possession. The simple act of having these items close during the night provided a sense of spiritual security, even when sleep was otherwise restless. In addition to these protective measures, many people practiced rituals before bed that they believed would ensure peaceful dreams. Lighting a candle in the room was a common practice, as fire was considered a purifier, a force that could drive away dark spirits. The flickering light, however faint, was thought to keep away nightmares and prevent any malevolent entities from entering the room while the sleeper was vulnerable. The soft glow of the candle also helped to calm the mind and body before sleep, encouraging a sense of tranquility. But the fear of the supernatural did not solely belong to the peasants. Nobles, kings, and queens, who wielded significant power, were not immune to the dread that filled the night. Monarchs too relied on dreams as guidance, and often took extensive precautions before retiring for bed. King Charles V of France, for instance, known as Charles the Mad, reportedly slept with guards and attendants by his side, convinced that demonic forces were plotting against him during the night. His fear of nightmarish dreams and spiritual threats became so profound that he would demand rituals be performed before he slept, including the burning of incense to purify the room. For many, the fear of the supernatural extended beyond the world of dreams and nightmares. It also touched upon the belief in restless spirits or ghosts. It was commonly thought that souls of the dead wandered at night seeking closure or resolution. Sleep was therefore seen as a time when the living could either receive messages from the dead or be harassed by their spirits. People who believed they had been visited by the dead in their dreams would often seek the guidance of a priest, who could interpret the meaning of the vision and offer a proper religious ritual to put the spirit to rest. The concept of sleep as a portal between life and death was especially important for those experiencing grief or loss. Many medieval people believed that dreams of the deceased were not just fanciful imaginings but important communications from the other side. People would sometimes enter a period of mourning, seeking to receive further messages from loved ones through their dreams. Special prayers and offerings would be made in hopes that the deceased would visit in sleep, providing comfort, guidance, or a final farewell. Despite these protective practices, the fear of the supernatural during sleep could not always be avoided. Nightmares, strange visions, and disturbing dreams were still common, and for many, They were the most terrifying part of the night. Some people went to great lengths to avoid sleep altogether, fearing that the dangers of the supernatural would take hold during their slumber. The fear of the unknown was often so strong that it overshadowed the very need for rest, and sleep became a battleground where the mind and soul fought against the forces they could not see but felt. Yet, for many, the protection of faith, whether through prayer, holy relics, or the intervention of the clergy, offered some form of peace. Though sleep remained a vulnerable state, the comfort of ritual and divine intervention reassured people that even in the face of their nightmares and fears, they were not alone. The protection of God, the saints and holy relics became a source of strength, allowing the people of medieval Europe to rest, albeit with caution and fear. In this section, we've explored how medieval people used rituals, prayers, and protective objects to safeguard themselves from the supernatural during sleep. The fear of nightmares, restless spirits, and the influence of evil forces shaped how sleep was viewed and how people prepared for it. Sleep in the Black Death, the last rest before plague strikes. The arrival of darkness, sleep in the shadow of the Black Death. Imagine for a moment that you are living in the early fall, in the time when the Black Death, one of the most devastating pandemics in history, is sweeping across Europe. You wake up, as you always do, to the sounds of birds outside your window, the hum of the early morning breeze, and the soft murmur of your family preparing for the day. But unlike any other day, there is a gnawing, unspoken fear in the air. You can sense it, a change in the rhythm of life. The streets are quieter than usual, the markets seem empty, and the distant whispers of illness, of death, spread quickly like a shadow, casting its darkened influence on your village. At night, sleep comes uneasily. The terror of the plague has already ripped the hearts of many. You lie awake, your bed of straw feeling harder than usual. Your body is tired, exhausted from the labor of the day, but your mind is restless. You close your eyes, but the darkness is thick with fear. You know that the sickness is close, and perhaps it is already in your home, in your village, or in the house next door. In the years leading up to the Black Death, sleep was a time of reflection and respite. But now, sleep feels different. It is no longer just rest. It is the unknown. It is the final pause before death's arrival. The Black Death is different from the regular fears and illnesses you are used to. It is swift and brutal, and it is not a matter of if it will strike, but when. You have heard the rumors from other villages, how the sickness strikes quickly, how people die within days of showing the first symptoms. Some say it is the wrath of God, a punishment for the sins of mankind. Others whisper that it is the work of witches or dark forces. Whatever the cause, the terror is real. The hours before sleep are filled with thoughts of what could come in the night. If you sleep, will you wake up to find that your loved ones are gone? Will you succumb to the plague yourself, without warning or mercy? The fear makes sleep restless, and even when you do manage to drift off, your dreams are filled with images of illness, death, and the faces of loved ones now lost. For the peasants and common folk, sleep is no longer a reprieve from the struggles of daily life. It has become something else, something deeply ominous. What once was a peaceful part of the day is now a time of dread. Every cough, every ache, every breath feels like a potential warning, and even the most basic acts of rest are tinged with fear. How long can you continue like this? How much longer can you carry the weight of uncertainty, knowing that in your sleep you might be visited by death? As the night deepens, you try to ignore the terror that lurks just beneath the surface of your thoughts. But the world outside your door is filled with the sounds of anxious prayers, of people worrying about their families, and of preparations being made for what seems inevitable. The Black Death is coming, and no one knows exactly how it will unfold. All you can do is lie in the darkness and wonder whether tomorrow will bring a plague that has already reached your doorstep, or if perhaps you will be lucky enough to sleep through the night untouched. In this section, we've painted a vivid picture of how the Black Death changed the nature of sleep during this time. Sleep, once a moment of rest and escape, becomes a time of anxiety, fear, and the unknown. The constant dread of the plague invades the very act of sleep, making it a fraught and uncertain experience. The unseen threat, the fear of plague in the silent hours of night. As you lie in the darkness of your room, the stillness of the night is broken only by the occasional creak of the wooden beams overhead, or the distant sounds of hushed conversations from the houses nearby. There's an eerie quiet in the air, as though the very world is holding its breath. The Black Death has already taken hold of several neighboring villages, and the uncertainty of when it will strike your own home hangs heavy over your sleep. The very idea of sleep, once a peaceful escape from the trials of the day, now feels like a cruel irony. As you close your eyes, you can hear the faint sound of your own breathing too loud in the silence. You wonder, as you try to find rest, if this is the night when the illness will come for you, when your family will be struck down by the invisible enemy that has already swept through the region. The symptoms of the plague are well known, and they fill your mind as you attempt to sleep. You've heard the stories how people begin with a fever, followed by aching limbs, chills, and then the terrifying appearance of painful buboes, swollen, blackened lymph nodes that signal the end is near. You think of the families who have lost loved ones in just a matter of days, the neighbors who suddenly fall ill without warning. Will you be one of the unlucky ones, or will your family survive like so many others who are praying for mercy? The night stretches on, and sleep eludes you. Each time you start to drift off, a new thought interrupts. The sound of a distant cough, the faint rustling of a family member moving in their bed, the knowledge that the world outside is filled with fear, the knowledge that no one is safe, not even in the sanctuary of your home. Every creak, every movement is a reminder of the terror that lurks just outside the door. As the hours pass, your body becomes more and more weary. The exhaustion from the day's labor and the weight of your thoughts start to weigh heavily on you. Yet sleep does not come. It is not just the physical discomfort of your bed or the cold that makes rest impossible. It is the fear. The Black Death is a silent invader, striking without warning. In the quiet of the night, your mind races, imagining the worst. You are aware of every sound in the house, the scratching of mice in the walls, the creak of the floorboards as someone shifts in their sleep, the quiet, rhythmic breathing of your loved ones nearby. Every noise becomes significant in the night, every small movement a reminder of the fragility of life. You think of the prayers that have been said before bed, the charms hung above the door to ward off evil spirits and disease, and wonder if they will be enough. People are still praying, hoping for deliverance, but many are already wondering if it's too late. The plague has swept through cities, towns, and villages with terrifying speed, and now there's nowhere to hide. The roads are empty, the markets are silent, and people have become strangers to each other, afraid to even touch. Some of the more superstitious folk in your village have taken to wearing garlic cloves around their necks, believing that the scent will ward off the disease. Others have placed crosses on their doors, marking their homes as protected from the curse of the Black Death. But despite these rituals, a terrible feeling gnaws at your heart. In the dead of the night, when everyone is supposed to be resting, the fear feels almost tangible, so close it suffocates you. Your thoughts turn to the dead you have heard about, how quickly the bodies are buried, how no one knows exactly how the disease spreads or how to stop it. As the hours drag on, you finally begin to drift into a restless, broken sleep, your dreams filled with feverish images, visions of faces masked in fear, of loved ones in the grip of sickness, and of the town's streets lined with carts to carry the dead. You dream of dark, ominous clouds hanging low in the sky, and the feeling of cold hands closing in around you. You awaken, gasping for air, heart pounding, only to realize that the nightmare is not over. The terror you feel in your dreams lingers even in the waking world. The long night of uncertainty ends with the first light of dawn, but even with the new day, the fear does not subside. You may have survived the night, but how long can you keep the sickness at bay? Will you be one of the fortunate ones, or will tomorrow bring another wake-up call, the arrival of the plague at your doorstep? As you rise from your bed, still shaky from the sleepless night, you know that the struggle is far from over. The days are long, and the plague is relentless, and while sleep will return, its peace will be fleeting, its security forever lost in the shadow of the Black Death. How much longer can you endure this endless cycle of fear and anxiety, knowing that the next night might be your last? In this section we explored the fear and anxiety surrounding sleep during the Black Death. The plague looms over the lives of medieval people, interrupting their rest and making sleep a time of dread rather than peace. The constant terror of the disease infiltrates the night, affecting not just physical sleep, but the very nature of dreams and thoughts. Odd sleep arrangements in medieval castles and houses, the royal bedchamber, where sleep was a privilege. In the grandeur of a medieval castle, sleep was an affair of luxury, politics and protocol. Imagine for a moment that you are a noble or royalty, living in a stone castle with towering walls, tapestries that line the halls, and candlelit chambers. Your bed is a soft four-poster affair, draped with velvet curtains that block the cold air. The sheets are thick, perhaps layered with furs for warmth, and the comfort of your sleep seems like a distant dream for the common folk living outside your castle walls. However, while your bed is luxurious, your sleep is far from simple. In medieval times, sleep arrangements were far more complex than merely climbing into bed after a long day. Sleep in a castle was often a performance, an event filled with both comfort and surveillance. The bedchamber, which was a place for rest, was also a space for public display. Kings and queens often slept in a room that was not entirely private. Nobles or trusted attendants might be in the same room, ready to attend to any need or emergency during the night. This arrangement might seem strange today, but it was perfectly normal in the medieval period. Sleep was not solely for rest. It was also a social and political act, a reminder that even in one's most vulnerable state, one must always be aware of the power dynamics in the court. The royal bed was often placed in full view of the room, and during certain occasions it would become a stage for ceremonial rituals. Upon rising from sleep, a king might be attended by high-ranking servants or even nobles. The idea of sleep as a public affair stemmed from the need to display power, and thus the royal bedchamber was often filled with people who would be present when the monarch awoke, attended to their morning rituals, and made their decisions for the day. As you lie in your sumptuous bed, you can sense the presence of others, perhaps even a trusted servant standing watch by the door, ensuring your rest is uninterrupted, or perhaps the faint sounds of whispers between your courtly advisors. They wait for your word, for when you rise, so does the court. The act of sleep is both a privilege and a necessity for you, but it is also a carefully regulated part of royal life. This unique arrangement of shared space within the royal quarters serves a dual purpose: to provide comfort, yes, but also to remind you of the responsibilities and expectations placed upon you as a monarch. There is little true solitude. Even your moments of rest are filled with the weight of governance and the needs of those around you. In this section, we've explored the strange and complex nature of sleep in royal castles, where even rest was a public affair, governed by political consideration. The comfort of royal sleep was intertwined with the expectations of governance, making sleep an act of both luxury and responsibility. The commoner's bed, sleep in the small homes of medieval life. While royalty and nobility slept in lavish chambers surrounded by attendants and luxury, the common folk lived in starkly different conditions. Their homes, usually small cottages, lacked the comfort and privacy afforded to those in power. Sleep in these households was a basic necessity, but the arrangement was far from ideal. Picture yourself in a small rural cottage, with walls made of timber or stone, and a thatched roof that leaks when it rains. Your bed, unlike the king's opulent four-poster, is little more than a pile of straw or coarse blankets spread across a wooden frame. The warmth of the fire in the hearth provides some comfort, but it only reaches so far. It is cold, and as you lie down, the hard surface beneath you is a constant reminder of how little you have. The night is long, and there are no soft pillows to rest your head, only the dampness of the straw that you've gathered for the bed. There is no privacy to speak of. Most homes, especially in rural villages, consisted of a single room where everyone slept: parents, children, sometimes even livestock. The space is cramped, and the sounds of snoring, the occasional cough, and the rustling of blankets fill the air. If you're lucky, you might have a small corner for yourself, but chances are you're sharing your bed with family members or even a few neighbors. In these conditions, sleep was often interrupted. The walls of your house offer little protection from the elements, and the cold is a constant companion, especially during the harsh winters. It's not just the cold that disrupts your sleep. The constant sounds of the outside world invade your dreams. The noise of farm animals, the calls of distant neighbors, or the wind howling through the cracks of the house often break the silence of the night. Even if sleep comes, it is rarely peaceful. Unlike the royal families, who enjoyed undisturbed nights in their grand chambers, your sleep was always at the mercy of the world around you. The intrusion of others into your private space, the discomfort of your bed, and the cold dampness of your cottage created a restless environment for sleep. There was no clock to mark the hours, no luxurious silk sheets to guarantee comfort. Sleep was simply a moment of respite after a long day of physical labor, a necessary part of the survival routine. And yet, there was a strange sense of solidarity in the shared sleep of the common folk. While the physical discomfort was undeniable, there was a sense that sleep, though restless, was something you did together. In a world of hardship, the act of lying down with others, of facing the long night in each other's company, became a form of shared survival. It was a quiet connection, an acknowledgement that despite the struggles, you were all in this together. The communal nature of sleep in these small homes offered a measure of comfort in knowing you were not alone in your hardship. But sleep, even in its discomfort, was essential. It was the only time of the day when you could momentarily escape from the constant worry of survival, as your body ached from the day's work and your mind remained filled with the concerns of the morrow. Sleep offered a brief respite. However, it was never guaranteed to be peaceful. The intrusion of your environment, the cold, the noise, and the crowded conditions meant that sleep in a commoner's bed was often a restless, fitful affair. In this section we explored the conditions of sleep in the homes of medieval common folk, where the struggle for rest was marked by discomfort, lack of privacy, and constant interruptions. Sleep was a basic necessity, yet one fraught with challenges. The night watch. Shared sleep and vigilance in medieval homes. As the night deepens and the world outside your small cottage grows quieter, the sense of security you long for remains just out of reach. While you and your family sleep in the same cramped space, each person wrapped in their thin, worn blankets, a constant vigilance hangs in the air. In a medieval world plagued by uncertainty, whether it's the threat of bandits, the potential for fire, or the ever-present fear of disease, sleep becomes not just a time of rest, but also a time of shared responsibility and protection. In many medieval homes, especially in the villages, sleep was not a solitary activity. People lived in close-knit communities, and their survival often depended on the ability to watch over each other. The fear being vulnerable in the dark, both to thieves and natural forces, meant that someone always had to stay awake. The idea of taking turns in watchfulness was common. One person might sleep while another stayed awake, alert for any sounds of danger, keeping a watchful eye on the fire, the door, or the movements in the street. This system of shared vigilance was not limited to the safety of one's home. When the night felt particularly dangerous, there might be a more communal watch, families and neighbors coming together to keep their village safe from the outside world. These informal night watches were an essential part of rural life. The idea of locking yourself in your home and sleeping undisturbed was almost foreign in such an environment. East, the act of sleep came with an unspoken agreement, an understanding that even in rest someone would be alert for threats. The need for security extended beyond physical danger. Medieval people were also deeply afraid of the supernatural, and some believed that the night was a time when evil spirits or dark forces could enter the home. Superstitions about spirits, ghosts, and witches often shaped the ways people prepared for sleep. Protective measures were common. Crosses or holy symbols might be placed by the door, charms or herbs hung over the windows, and candles or small fires were kept burning to ward off the darkness. As you lie down in your small bed, the fear of these unseen dangers is palpable. Though the warmth of your family beside you provides a certain comfort, the anxiety about the night's potential threats lingers. The darkness outside the house seems to stretch endlessly, and you wonder whether sleep, in its vulnerability, will offer you any reprieve from your fears. The thought of waking to find someone has broken into your home, or worse, that something supernatural has entered, is enough to keep you tossing and turning. Despite this, sleep does come. It is not peaceful, nor is it uninterrupted, but eventually, you succumb to exhaustion. Even in your fitful sleep, you remain alert. The sounds of the world outside your home sharp in your ears. The rustle of the wind, the distant bark of a dog, or the faint creaking of the roof, all trigger your senses. You might wake momentarily, checking to make sure everyone in your family is still safe, that the fire hasn't gone out, that no one has entered your home while you slept. But even in the midst of these fragmented moments of rest, there's a sense of solidarity. In medieval times, sleep was not just an individual experience, it was a shared one. The rhythms of sleep, whether it was taking turns with the night watch, sleeping close to one another for warmth, or sharing the burden of vigilance, helped create a sense of community, even in the most private of moments. The hurdles of survival were felt by all, and sleep, though a time of personal rest, was also a collective effort. For you and your family, sleep was both an act of necessity and an act of trust. The shared responsibility of keeping watch, even if only in spirit, made the night feel less frightening. As the hours passed and the world outside grew colder and quieter, sleep became a strange mixture of exhaustion, fear, and comfort. You found what peace you could, but always with the awareness that the world outside was unpredictable and often unforgiving. In your bed of straw, surrounded by the quiet murmur of your family's breathing, you fall into sleep, knowing that someone else in the house will be awake, watching over you, just as you have watched over them in the past. In this final section, we've explored how sleep in medieval homes was marked by shared vigilance and protection. The act of sleeping was never just an individual experience, but a collective one, as families and communities worked together to ensure their safety in a world full of threats. The fragility of sleep, coupled with the ever-present dangers, made it a time of both fear and solidarity.